The classroom buzzed with the low hum of pencils scratching paper, chairs creaking, and children whispering answers to themselves as they worked. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, warming the pale blue walls decorated with spelling charts and crayon drawings. Everything felt normal, ordinary, until the teacher noticed the little girl in the third row. She wasn't writing. At first, it didn't seem unusual. Some children took longer to start. But as minutes passed, the girl remained completely still, her small shoulders tense, her head bowed low over a blank sheet of paper. Her pencil lay untouched between her fingers, which trembled as if she were holding something heavy instead of a simple yellow stick. The teacher watched more closely. The girl's lips quivered, a tear slipped down her cheek and splashed onto the paper, leaving a dark circle in the corner. Another tear followed, then another. The teacher stood up quietly and walked over, kneeling beside the desk so she wouldn't draw attention. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered gently. "What's wrong? Are you stuck on the question?" The girl shook her head without looking up. Her breathing was uneven, shallow, like she was trying not to cry but failing. "Can you tell me what's hurting?" the teacher asked. The child hesitated, then lifted her right hand slightly off the desk. Her voice came out barely louder than air. "My finger, it hurts. I can't move it." The teacher's heart tightened. She reached out carefully and took the girl's hand in hers. That's when she saw it. A silver ring, too small, too tight, was jammed onto the girl's ring finger. The finger was swollen far beyond its normal size, the skin stretched and shiny. The color wasn't right either. It wasn't pink, it wasn't red, it was deep purple, almost blue, like a bruise that had gone too far. The teacher's breath caught. "How long has this been on your finger?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. The girl sniffed. "I don't know. A long time. Did it hurt this morning?" The girl nodded slowly. "It hurts all the time now." The teacher gently touched the finger near the ring. The girl gasped and pulled back, crying out softly. The finger felt cold, far colder than it should have been. That's when panic hit. The teacher had seen injuries before, cuts, scrapes, even broken bones, but this was different. This wasn't something that could wait until the end of the day. The ring was cutting off circulation. The finger was swelling more by the minute. If blood couldn't flow properly, tissue could be damaged. Permanently. She stood up quickly and signaled to the classroom aide. "Please take over," she said quietly but urgently. "I need to step out with her." She lifted the girl gently into her arms, holding her hand carefully so the finger wouldn't be bumped. The child buried her face into the teacher's shoulder, sobbing now, the pain finally too much to hide. In the hallway, the teacher pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. "Yes," she said as soon as the call connected, her voice tight with fear. "I'm at an elementary school. I have a young child with a ring cutting off circulation to her finger. It's swollen and turning purple. She's in pain." The operator asked questions, calm and steady, but the teacher could barely focus. Her eyes stayed locked on the girl's finger, watching the color, praying it wouldn't get darker. "Help is on the way," the operator said. "Do not attempt to remove the ring yourself." "I won't," the teacher replied quickly. She wouldn't risk hurting the child more. They moved into the nurse's office, where the girl was placed gently on the exam bed. The school nurse arrived moments later, her face falling as soon as she saw the finger. "Oh no," the nurse whispered. "This is serious." She tried elevating the hand, placing cold packs nearby but not directly on the finger, following instructions from the emergency operator. The girl whimpered, clutching the teacher's sleeve. "Am I going to lose my finger?" the child asked through tears. The teacher swallowed hard and forced a smile. "No, sweetheart, you're going to be okay. Help is coming." But inside, fear churned. Sirens grew louder outside, echoing through the building. Teachers peeked into the hallway, concern written across their faces. The normal rhythm of the school day had shattered, replaced by an uneasy silence. Paramedics rushed in with equipment, their movements quick and precise. One of them knelt beside the bed, examining the finger carefully. "How long has the ring been on?" he asked. The girl shrugged weakly. "I don't remember." The paramedic exchanged a look with his partner. "We need to remove it immediately," he said. "Circulation is severely compromised." He took out a specialized ring cutter, explaining each step softly to the girl to keep her calm. The metal tool slid under the ring. The sound of cutting metal filled the room, sharp and tense. The girl screamed when pressure was applied. The teacher held her hand, her good hand, and whispered soothing words, even as her own eyes filled with tears. Finally, With a small snap, the ring broke apart and fell away. Everyone held their breath. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the finger began to change color. Purple faded to red, red softened into pink. Warmth returned. The paramedic nodded. That's a good sign. The girl collapsed back against the bed, exhausted, her cries turning into hiccuping sobs. The pain wasn't gone, but it was no longer crushing. She needs to go to the hospital, the paramedic said. There could still be internal damage. The teacher nodded, relief and worry crashing together. As the girl was prepared for transport, questions began to surface. Where were her parents? How had this happened? The girl finally spoke, her voice small. It was my sister's ring. I wanted to be like her. It fit before, but then my finger got bigger. No one scolded her. No one blamed her. They just listened. As she was wheeled out on the stretcher, the teacher walked alongside, holding her hand until the very last moment. What started as a child unable to write had become a race against time, a reminder that sometimes the quietest tears hide the most dangerous pain. The ambulance ride was short but tense. The little girl clung to the teacher's hand, her small fingers gripping tightly despite the residual pain in her swollen ring finger. Every bump along the road made her wince, every siren outside seemed to echo the fear in her heart. The teacher spoke softly, humming a few lines of a nursery rhyme to distract her, but the child's wide eyes remained glued to the ceiling of the ambulance, darting nervously at every movement of the paramedics. Upon arrival at the hospital, the emergency team moved with practiced urgency. Nurses wheeled her through stark, fluorescent-lit hallways, while doctors prepared a small examination room. The teacher followed closely, her heart thudding in her chest, wondering how quickly this small accident had escalated into a potentially serious medical emergency. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic. Machines beeped softly in the background, adding to the tension. The paramedic handed the girl over to the hospital staff, explaining the situation in precise terms. This is a case of acute circulatory obstruction, one doctor said, his tone calm but firm. We need to assess for tissue damage and make sure no permanent injury occurred. The girl's eyes grew even wider at the words, and she pressed herself against the teacher, trembling. Am I going to lose it? She asked, her voice barely audible. The doctor knelt down to her level, smiling gently. No, sweetheart, you're very lucky. The ring didn't stay on too long. We just need to make sure everything inside your finger is okay. The nurse guided her to a small bed, elevating her hand and placing it carefully on a soft pillow. The teacher stayed beside her, holding her other hand to provide comfort. Machines hummed and a gentle lamp shone on her fingers as the doctors examined the tissue and checked for proper blood flow. The examination revealed that, although the finger had been starved of circulation for several hours, no permanent damage had occurred. The little girl's fingernail and skin were slightly bruised, but the bones and internal tissue were intact. A sense of relief washed over the teacher, though her chest still felt tight with the remnants of fear. The doctor smiled. She's going to be fine. Some swelling might remain for a few days, but there won't be any lasting injury. We'll give her some pain relief and keep her under observation for a bit, just to be safe. The child, exhausted and trembling, let out a soft sigh. Her sobs had quieted, replaced with quiet sniffles. Thank you, she whispered to the teacher, her voice barely above a whisper. The teacher hugged her gently. You were so brave, she said. Braver than you even know. As the child rested, the hospital staff began documenting the incident. Social workers arrived to ask gentle questions, ensuring the girl was safe at home and that her family understood the severity of what had happened. The teacher stayed throughout, answering questions and providing context. It was during this time that the child opened up about how the ring had ended up on her finger. It was my older sister's, she explained, her voice still shaky. I wanted to be like her. I thought it was pretty. I forgot to tell anyone when it got stuck. The social worker nodded gently. It happens, she said. Sometimes accidents like this are the result of curiosity. But it's very important that we all learn how dangerous even small things can be if we're not careful. The teacher held back tears. The child was innocent, just a curious little girl wanting to emulate her sister, yet she had been put in a situation that could have caused permanent harm. It was a sobering reminder that accidents could hide behind the smallest, most innocent of gestures. The nurse returned a few minutes later with a small tray of water and crackers. You've been very brave, she said, placing it beside the little girl. You can rest now, your finger will heal, and you'll be able to go home soon. The girl nodded, but her eyes remained wary. The teacher stroked her hair gently. "Do you want me to stay until you feel better?" she asked. The child nodded, curling slightly into the pillow. The teacher stayed, offering quiet reassurance and a comforting presence, watching as the little girl's breathing gradually slowed and her tense shoulders relaxed. Meanwhile, outside the room, the paramedics and hospital staff discussed the emergency response. "That teacher acted quickly," one paramedic said. "If she hadn't noticed the color change, we might be dealing with a more serious injury." The other nodded. "It's a reminder that vigilance matters. Sometimes, it's the small, almost invisible signs that indicate real danger." Back in the room, the little girl's mother finally arrived, rushing into the room with wide eyes and a face full of panic. She froze when she saw her daughter lying on the hospital bed, the ring long removed, her finger bandaged gently. "Mommy," the child cried, reaching out. The mother scooped her up immediately, holding her close and rocking her gently. Tears streamed down her face. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know, I didn't see." The teacher stepped forward gently. "It's okay, she's going to be fine. You need to make sure rings aren't too small for her fingers, that's all. This could happen to anyone." The mother nodded, sobbing and nodding again, overwhelmed with guilt and relief. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at the teacher. "I don't know what I would have done if." The teacher simply shook her head. "You're here now. That's what matters." As the evening progressed, the little girl's finger began to regain full movement. The bruising faded slightly, the swelling reduced, and a faint pink color replaced the deep purple from earlier. The child laughed softly when her mother gently wiggled her fingers, testing them. "It feels funny," she said, her small hand stretching and curling. "Yes, it's healing," the nurse said with a smile. "But remember, no more trying on rings that don't fit, okay?" The child nodded solemnly. "Okay," she said, hugging her mother tightly. Before leaving, the teacher knelt beside the little girl one last time. "Remember, it's okay to ask for help," she said. "You don't have to be brave all by yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing is letting someone know you're in pain." The girl smiled faintly, her big eyes glistening. "I will," she promised. As they left the hospital, the teacher reflected on the events of the day. What started as a quiet classroom morning, a child unable to write, had turned into a life-saving emergency. The lesson was clear. Even small signs, tiny tears, trembling fingers, could point to serious hidden danger. And the teacher realized, with a mixture of relief and awe, how crucial vigilance, compassion, and quick action could be. The little girl, once crying helplessly at her desk, now clutched her mother's hand firmly as they walked to the car. Her fingers still bandaged but safe, she turned back once at the teacher and whispered, "Thank you, for saving me." The teacher smiled, fighting back tears. "You're welcome, sweetheart. Always remember, you're never alone when you need help." And with that, they left the hospital, the sun setting in golden streaks across the city, a quiet reminder that even the smallest moments could hold the gravest dangers, and that courage, compassion, and swift action could make all the difference in the world. This incident would stay with everyone who witnessed it, especially the teacher. She knew that today had not only saved a child's finger but perhaps also reminded her and the entire school community of the fragile, delicate nature of life, and the profound responsibility to protect it, even in the smallest, most unexpected ways. The little girl would return to school in the following days, ring-free and with a new respect for her own safety. She would sometimes glance at her hand and remember the fear, the pain, and the relief. But more importantly, she would remember the teacher who noticed the smallest signs, acted immediately, and saved her from harm, turning tears and helplessness into safety and hope. Even the classroom, once ordinary, now felt like a place where vigilance mattered, where attention to detail could make the difference between danger and rescue. And as the teacher looked out at the smiling faces of her students, she silently vowed never to overlook even the smallest signs of distress again, knowing firsthand that even the tiniest cry could hide something life-threatening beneath it. By the end of that day, everyone involved had learned something profound. Courage isn't always loud, heroism isn't always dramatic, and sometimes saving a life comes down to noticing the subtle, overlooked signals that speak of pain, fear, and danger. The little girl had taught them all that lesson in the most vivid, unforgettable way possible.